How do you survive a winter so cold that exposed skin freezes in minutes when your home is made of animal hides and wooden poles? At first glance, it sounds impossible. Imagine standing on the Great Plains in the middle of January. The horizon stretches endlessly in every direction. There are no mountains to shield you, no forests to break the wind. Nothing but open grassland buried beneath snow. The wind has been traveling for days. It sweeps across hundreds of miles of frozen prairie, gathering speed with every mile. By the time it reaches you, the air temperature is already below -30 degrees Celsius. The wind makes it feel far colder. Your fingers begin to lose dexterity. Your face burns. Your lungs ache with every breath. Without shelter, the clock begins counting down immediately. And yet for thousands of years, entire nations lived here. Not merely surviving, thriving. Children were born here. Families grew old here. Communities flourished here through winters that modern people would consider uninhabitable. The question is not how they endured the cold. The real question is how they transformed one of the harshest environments in North America into a place called home. The answer begins with a structure many people think they already understand: the tipi. But what most people imagine is only the outer shell. The true genius was hidden inside. And the people responsible for that genius were not warriors or chiefs. They were women. Modern eyes often see a tipi as temporary shelter, a simple tent, a primitive dwelling. Nothing could be further from reality. The Plains tipi was the product of centuries of refinement. Every angle, every material, every stitch existed for a reason. Women were the architects, builders, and owners of the lodge. They selected the poles. They prepared the hides. They assembled the structure. They maintained it. In many Plains cultures, a woman could identify a well-built tipi from a great distance simply by the way it stood against the wind. Construction began with long, straight poles, often cedar, lodgepole pine, or other durable woods transported across great distances through trade networks. 3 or 4 primary poles formed the foundation. These poles were tied together using buffalo sinew. This detail mattered. Unlike ordinary rope, dried sinew contracts as it dries. Instead of loosening over time, the connection becomes tighter. The structure effectively strengthened itself. Additional poles were then arranged around the frame. Each pole distributed stress across the entire skeleton. Rather than resisting the wind through rigidity, the tipi absorbed and redirected force. Strong prairie winds flowed around its conical shape, much like water flowing around a stone in a river. The shape was not accidental. It was aerodynamic engineering centuries before the word existed. The tipi was impossible without one animal: the American buffalo. For Plains peoples, buffalo were far more than food. They were the foundation of civilization. A single buffalo could provide meat, tools, containers, clothing, bedding, thread, glue, and shelter materials. The outer covering of a winter tipi often required the hides of many animals. Women processed each hide through a complex tanning process. The hides were scraped clean. Brains were used during tanning because natural oils softened the fibers. Afterward, the hides were smoked. This final step added water resistance and helped preserve the material. The result was remarkably durable, flexible enough to move, strong enough to withstand storms, capable of lasting through years of harsh weather. Individual hides were sewn together using bone needles and sinew thread. Every seam represented hours of skilled labor. The final cover became a single continuous skin stretched tightly over the frame. Yet this outer layer was only the beginning. The real secret remained hidden beneath it. Modern insulation works by trapping air. The people of the Great Plains understood this principle long before anyone described it scientifically. During winter, women installed an interior liner around the lower portion of the tipi. At first glance, it appeared simple: a second wall made from hides. But its effects were extraordinary. Between the outer cover and the inner liner formed a narrow chamber of trapped air. This air remained largely motionless. Engineers call this dead air space. Still air is one of the most effective insulators in nature. The trapped layer dramatically slowed heat loss through the walls. Studies of traditional teepee designs suggest this feature alone could raise interior temperatures significantly compared to the outside environment. In other words, the teepee was not heated because the walls were thick. It was heated because the air inside the walls was trapped. The same principle exists today in double-pane windows, insulated jackets, and modern building construction. The concept is familiar. The invention is ancient, and it transformed life on the northern plains. Now comes the part most people never notice. Heat alone is not enough. Without ventilation, smoke becomes deadly. Every winter, shelter faces the same challenge. How do you keep warmth inside while allowing smoke to escape? The Plains peoples solved this problem with remarkable elegance. Cold air entered near ground level. As it moved toward the central fire, it warmed. Warm air naturally rises. But thanks to the interior liner, rising air was directed upward through the hidden space between the liner and the outer cover. The entire structure functioned as a giant chimney. Smoke and heated air traveled upward toward two adjustable smoke flaps positioned at the apex of the teepee. These flaps could be opened or closed depending on wind direction. Experienced women adjusted them constantly. A slight change in angle could improve draft, reduce smoke accumulation, or conserve heat. The lodge was not a static shelter. It was a living machine, a responsive environmental system capable of adapting to changing weather. And this was only part of the technology, because outside the teepee, another layer of engineering was quietly protecting everyone inside. A material so common that most people walk past it every winter without ever considering its hidden power. Snow. To most people, snow represents cold. To the people of the Great Plains, snow could become part of a heating system. It sounds backward. After all, snow forms in freezing temperatures. It covers the ground in ice. It signals the arrival of winter. Yet snow contains something surprisingly valuable: air. Fresh snow is filled with countless tiny pockets of trapped air. Those pockets slow the movement of heat, making snow a remarkably effective insulator. The same principle allows animals like Arctic foxes and snowshoe hares to survive brutal winters. It is why creatures burrow beneath snow rather than avoid it. Plains families understood this through experience. During severe winters, snow was carefully packed around the lower edge of the teepee, not directly against the hide. That would trap moisture and eventually damage the cover. Instead, a small gap was maintained. The resulting snowbank blocked the strongest ground-level winds while creating another insulating barrier around the structure. The difference could be dramatic. Outside, icy air raced across the prairie at highway speeds. Inside, the lower living space remained protected from the worst drafts. Some families went even further. Dried grasses, reeds, or additional insulating materials were placed between the liner and outer cover, creating yet another layer of trapped air. Every winter brought new challenges. Every generation refined solutions. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was accidental. Most people imagine survival in extreme cold as a battle fought with larger fires. The Plains' approach was different. The goal was not to create more heat. The goal was to keep heat from escaping. A small, controlled fire burned near the center of the lodge. Because the teepee's ventilation system managed airflow so efficiently, the fire could remain relatively modest while still providing comfort. But another technology worked silently through the night: heated stones. Before sleep, stones were placed among the coals until they absorbed enormous amounts of thermal energy. The glowing stones were then wrapped in hides or positioned beneath sleeping areas. Long after the visible flames had faded, the stones continued releasing stored heat. This was thermal storage centuries before modern heating systems used the same principle. Some archaeologists compare it to a primitive battery. The fire charged the stones. The stones released warmth slowly over time. Families woke to temperatures far warmer than the outside world should have allowed. Even mobility did not eliminate this advantage. When camps moved, live coals were sometimes preserved inside specially prepared containers, allowing fire itself to travel across the plains. The result was extraordinary. Heat became portable. Warmth became part of the migration. There was one obvious problem on the Great Plains. Trees were scarce. In many regions, large forests simply did not exist. So where did fuel come from? The answer surprised many early European travelers. Buffalo dung. Today, the idea often provokes laughter. For the people who lived on the plains, it was one of the most valuable resources available. Dried buffalo dung burned cleanly. It produced consistent heat. It generated relatively little smoke. Most importantly, it was abundant wherever buffalo herds traveled. Women gathered and stored it throughout the year. By winter, substantial fuel reserves could be ready for use. This was not desperation. It was adaptation. The same animal that provided food, clothing, shelter, tools, and transportation also provided energy. Few human societies have ever achieved such complete integration with a single ecological resource. Buffalo were not merely hunted. They formed the foundation of an entire way of life. A civilization built not against nature, but alongside it. The engineering principles of the teepee did not stop at the walls. They continued onto the human body. Winter clothing followed exactly the same thermal logic. Layering, air trapping, moisture management. Buffalo robes harvested during the coldest months possessed exceptionally dense fur. The fur was often worn inward, close to the body. Tiny pockets of air became trapped within the fibers. Body heat warmed this air. Once warmed, the air acted as insulation. Additional robes created multiple thermal layers. The effect was remarkably efficient. Modern winter jackets use the same concept. Whether the insulation is goose down, synthetic fibers, or buffalo fur, the objective remains identical. Trap warm air. Prevent heat loss. Maintain a stable microclimate around the body. Inside the lodge, 8 to 10 people often shared the same space. Each person generated roughly as much heat as a small electric heater. Combined body warmth contributed significantly to interior temperatures. The family itself became part of the heating system. Children slept close to parents. Robes overlapped. Shared warmth reduced fuel requirements. Comfort was achieved not through excess resources, but through intelligent design. Everything worked together. The shelter, the clothing, the fire, the people. Every piece strengthened the whole. For generations, outsiders looked across the Great Plains and saw only a simple, hide-covered shelter standing against the wind. They were wrong. What they were really seeing was centuries of accumulated knowledge passed from grandmother to granddaughter, refined through countless winters, and built upon a deep understanding of wind, heat, snow, and survival. The teepee itself was not the greatest achievement. The knowledge behind it was. Long before modern engineers studied airflow and insulation, Plains women were designing shelters that stayed warm, ventilated, and efficient even during brutal winter storms. No castles, no monuments, no written blueprints, only ideas tested across generations and perfected by experience. The people of the Great Plains did not merely survive their environment, they mastered it. And perhaps that is history's greatest lesson. The most remarkable technologies are not always the largest or most visible. Sometimes they are the ones so perfectly adapted to their world that they almost disappear. Here at Dark Origins, we explore those forgotten innovations, because the deeper we look into the past, the more we discover how extraordinary our ancestors truly were. And beyond the edge of recorded history, countless stories are still waiting to be found.